This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Speaking with my friend Rob Apps today, filmmaker Rob Apps. Thanks so much for doing this today, Rob.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope I can live up all the hype you've given me over time. So hopefully this is a great conversation. I'm sure it will
Well,
be.
I'm sure anybody who's seen your film or any of the work you've done knows that you're a top-notch filmmaker for sure. But before we get into The Last Lightkeepers, your film, can you just say a little bit about your background as far as filmmaking goes?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up here in New England. I live currently in New Hampshire now. But I spent a lot of summers in on the Maine coast. My grandfather was a big boater and sailor there, and he also was big in home videos, and so that's sort of where I found my passion for filmmaking. He gave me one of those giant can't VHS camcorders, and I would run around filming everyone, and they did not like that at all. I'd always sneak up on people. But from there, I think I really gravitated towards documentary filmmaking. I ended up going to Ithaca College and got a film degree there. And when I left, or when I graduated, had to get a big boy job. And so luckily I had my foot in the door at a news station and worked my way up within a year from handing scripts and running the teleprompter for some of the anchors, which if you didn't run that teleprompter correctly, they got pretty mad at you. So I had to get used to paying attention to detail, and then quickly moved into editing there, and then moved into advertising. And that's really where I got back into filmmaking there, because social media was taking off. A lot of brands wanted to make short content, documentary style, and so I was kind of thrust back into that, which was great. And in doing that, I started thinking, I have access to this gear. Maybe I could start making some short films. And at that moment, I was walking around Rockport with my wife, well, my now wife, then girlfriend, and we were just exploring the quarries up there. And I started wondering where all these stones went, and started looking into it more and seeing all these monuments and bridges and roads. And that was sort of the first documentary I worked on. It was a short documentary, but one of the places I got to go to was Graves Light with Dave Waller. And um, that's when I found out also about people buying lighthouses. And so that was sort of my intro to lighthouses. And then I found you, Jeremy, when I started doing a little Google search. And you were the first person I think I got in contact with. I mean, besides Dave, it wasn't really about lighthouses, it was about quarrying back then. And you really introduced me to this whole world. And I think I kidnapped you in the lighthouse over your shoulder there, and you must have spoke for 7 hours straight about everything, and my brain almost exploded when I heard all these stories and all these places. And so that's really where this film came up. And you really helped guide me on that and introduce me to all these interesting characters, and that's where The Last Lightkeepers became real.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry if I made your head almost explode. You get me talking about lighthouses. 7 hours is nothing. So
I knew I found the right person at that moment, when you had an answer and a story, and a story about that story, and a story about that story.
yeah.
And that's kind of the great thing about lighthouses, is just you can pick a person, a place, a location, and there's just stories that go on and on and on. And so I think before we get more into the film, it's just I definitely want to thank all of you that work on lighthouses, that continue their stories. It's an incredible history, and it's just amazing to hear all those things. And I hope people listening to this, watching this, and other people really dive in, especially if you live in New England, or anywhere on the coast, or in Michigan on one of the lakes. It's that go find your local lighthouse, go learn about it, go donate $5, go do something, go help one day paint a boardwalk or the lighthouse itself. I think
Yeah.
you'll have a lot of fun doing that.
Oh yeah. every lighthouse has a story, and some of them have 1,000 stories, you know. So lucky for me, there's no end to it.
Absolutely.
So would you consider yourself a lighthouse nut now?
Compared to you, Jeremy, maybe not, but compared to me, some of my friends, some of my family, I'm not a history buff in that sense, I guess. I mean, I know probably more than the average person, but whenever I see one or anyone I know sees one, they take a picture and send it to me. And they're like, I'm at this, I'm at here. And it's really cool to see some of my friends and people in my network go explore some of these places. And you know, some of them message me like, oh, I want to go buy a lighthouse. I'm like, yeah, well, you're going to find out how much they cost and how much work there is and the constant upkeep and everything. And so it's just an endless topic, an endless story. And it's always amazing to be a part of.
Yeah. So let's move on to talking specifically about the film, and we're going to show 5 clips today and discuss them. First of all, people will see, if they haven't seen it already, when they see the clips, they'll realize that it's all just beautifully shot visually. It's just so nice. Did you shoot the whole film yourself?
Mostly. I did have a couple filmmakers come with me for some of the bigger interviews, like with you, with Eric J. Dolan, the author of Brilliant Beacons, and I had another filmmaker come with me to film Paul Saint Germain at the Cape Ann Museum in front of the big First Order Fresnel lens. So in that sense, I had some help. And then towards the end, I wanted to get, I licensed some clips from some filmmakers who had some drone footage in certain locations that I just couldn't get to. I think that was one of the difficult parts of this film is, you know, yes, it's concentrated on just New England, but the New England coast is massive. And so getting everywhere was a little difficult. They're planning trips out there. So in that sense, but I would say 95% of the film was me strapping a backpack on and throwing whatever camera gear I could get in there. These locations are absolutely amazing. So I tell people I cheated when filming because it's just, you go there at sunrise or sunset and you're going to get amazing footage of these lighthouses of the sunset and sunrise. And so in that sense, most of the film was independent style, like really independent, me with a backpack. And one of the things, you know, was getting out to these locations. Sometimes you'd find out the day before, right? Like I did a lot of filming at Halfway Rock with Ford Reike in Maine. And, you know, sometimes he'd be like, oh, I'm going out Wednesday because it's weather dependent if you want to go. And I'd get up at 3 a.m. and go. And it's hard to find someone who's willing to get up that early and go with you to film a documentary about lighthouses. So it was quite the adventure. Yeah.
You mentioned sunset and sunrise. I think you shot a large percentage of the film in what they call the golden hour, either near sunrise or sunset, right?
It's cheating. It's just when, I mean, the colors of New England are absolutely amazing at that time.
Yeah.
It's a postcard. Every lighthouse is a postcard if you go there.
Mm-hmm. I spent a week, at least several days, with the famous French photographer Jean Guichard back in 2001, who people might know is really famous photograph of the La Jamont lighthouse with the wave coming around it and the keeper standing in the doorway. One probably the most famous lighthouse photo ever taken. He told me he didn't even consider shooting in the middle of the day. He shot it was just still photos, but he shot absolutely everything within like an hour of dawn and an hour of dusk, you know. So
I like to think that I'm the same as that photographer, so I guess I'm brilliant as well, right?
Yeah. And one of my favorite movies is Days of Heaven. I don't know if you ever saw that, but that was almost all shot in the golden hour as well, and looks that way. Anyway, but I digress. Yeah. So let's look at the first clip, which is actually the opening of the film. A minute or so of the opening. So let's show that, and then we'll talk about that.
there's no question lighthouses have come a long way since 1789. The system expanded and evolved as navigational needs required. And the United States today ranks with the nation's leading nations in providing aids to navigation. The theme dominating lighthouses today is historic preservation. The people who are members of these local organizations are dedicated and conscientious and devote much time and labor to these historic structures. They make a dollar travel a long distance because they spend most of the money they raise on materials and volunteer their labor to do the repairs. Building a new light structure is materials intensive, but preserving a historic structure is labor intensive. The keepers and their families have to be remembered also. They made the system work and often performed their duties under the most trying of circumstances. Some lost their lives in the hurricanes of South Florida, the tidal wave in Alaska, and the hurricane of 1938 that did so much damage to New England. They were all authentic heroes, and from what I have read about them, they were admirable people. Along the way, lighthouses picked up a nation of devotees. Americans love lighthouses. Artists and photographers find them picturesque. The dreamer finds them romantic. The boaters find them comforting. The navigator finds them helpful. The shore walker finds them peaceful. The historic preservationist feels they make a statement about a period of time. The historian is fascinated with the human and technological story they embody. And the idealist is drawn to them because they symbolize man's humanity to man. Americans generally like and respect their historic structures, but it seems to me there's a special place in their heart they reserve for lighthouses.
So I was really interested when you put the film together to see that you used video there of F. Ross Holland, the late historian, one of the better known lighthouse historians in the country. And speaking of VHS camcorders, as you were earlier, I shot that with my VHS camcorder back on August 7th, 1989, which was Lighthouse Bicentennial Day, the 200th anniversary of a federal lighthouse service. And that was at Portland Headlight. And I think I was the only person who videotaped that whole thing. I had my camera on a tripod for the whole event. Pretty memorable being there for sure. So what made you decide to use that part of his speech there in the opening?
Yeah, I think it just relates. It's what, almost 35 years ago today. I mean, at the time it was, I think, just 30, but when I was filming. And so you think about how much that still all rings true today. Like, and just everything about it is just straight to how everything relates to lighthouses. And I remember asking you, I think, if you had any footage or any audio from the past that I can use. And the whole film is based on that premise, is tying the past with the present, right? I think it's important to educate people about lighthouses and get certain bits and pieces of that. So if you take, a section of the film is about the Fresnel lens. So it's what I did was parallel lighthouse illumination with efforts today. And so that was always sort of the cross section of each chapter in the film was educating about the past and then showing how that's kind of resurrecting in the present time. Dave Waller built his own Fresnel lens, which is really cool when he couldn't get his hands on the one from Graveslight. And so it's stories like that, which is what I gravitated towards. And then also just there's a section that talks about the people of lighthouses. And so the human element of lighthouses is so important to the history of it. It's, that's what caused that period of decay in between, keepers and lighthouses going up for auction or going to nonprofits, was they took the human element out of there, right? And so when that left, you lost a lot of story in there. But also the lighthouse, went into decay for the most part. It was just about the Coast Guard operating the fog signal, and the light, and that was it. And so the buildings and everything, how quickly nature in the ocean along the New England coast can just cause absolute damage to these structures, wintertime especially. And so
Yeah.
that section talking about, all the different people, that human element, whether you're just a photographer, whether you're a boater, whether you're an actual preservationist of these lighthouses, I just loved that. And that audio, that speech really kind of set the film up for what the story was going to be about.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. There are a couple of short clips in there as well from old like home movies. I think from Fred Mickelson, right? A former lightkeeper. I was so glad I was able to put you in touch with him. He was a keeper at Conimicut Light in Rhode Island in the late 1950s for a couple of years. And he's a great storyteller, and not many keepers preserve things like that. These films and photographs that he took at the time. He was also an artist. So I was really happy I was able to put you in touch with him.
Yeah, he's such a great storyteller, like you said. And I don't even think when I first went down there to interview him, I knew he had that old footage. I think after we had done the interview and just we're hanging out talking, he mentioned, "Oh, I have, some old film." And I think I came back another day just because he had to set it all up, find the projector and everything and set it all up. And that was such a pleasant surprise. When you dig into some of these stories, you just keep finding more and keep finding more and keep finding more. And so to have that footage to incorporate into this was absolutely, spectacular.
Yeah, it's rare. It's like treasure. So obviously, with the opening, you're trying to draw people in. That's pretty obvious, and you do that largely with by showing a little bit of one of the most exciting parts of the film, giving sort of a tease of that with getting on Halfway Rock with Ford Reike. That just blows me away every time I see it, because I've had the experience of getting on there a couple of times, although the first time was with the Coast Guard, and it was pretty rough when we had trouble landing. There was no Ford didn't own it yet, so the landing dock or ramp, whatever you want to call it, he rebuilt that, extended it. At the time I went out with the Coast Guard, there was nothing there, and the boat, they kept circling the rock, the island, trying to figure out where to land, and it took a while, and it was not easy. The second time I was lucky enough to go by helicopter to be in a TV show, so that was made life a lot easier. But we can talk more about that when we show a clip of Ford Reike. But I don't know if you want to say something about that right now. That had to be such an incredible experience.
Yeah, we can talk about that, absolutely. I think I didn't know how you got on to Halfway Rock. And so when we first went out, we were on a really nice boat that he has. I don't know the name of the boat, but it's like an ex Coast Guard boat. So it has the shock absorbing seats and everything, and it's amazing. And I never really thought about the next step of getting on to the island. Obviously, there's no giant wharf, and it's shallow in some of the areas. So there's it's surrounded by 360 degrees of crashing waves. It's not a nice place to land at all. And so, and like you were talking about, that decay period washed that ramp multiple times over the years. And so there was rebar everywhere, or iron, whatever you wanted, whatever anchored to the rock there. And so I'm sure there was pieces of that hanging out all the time. And actually, with the first time we went, this was a big learning lesson for me. We got on fine, but when we left, I didn't, the tide went down a little bit, so the boat's up higher, and that ramp, as you can see in the footage, is really slippery. It's when it's high tide, from that point down to low tide, it's just mossy, greasy. And I was the last one to get in the rubber raft with Ford, and there was someone else there helping him with some work. And he just said, get in and, push it, have one leg out and push, and we'll slide down like a toboggan. And I was like, oh, okay, this sounds fun. And I got all my camera gear there, and camera gear can't get wet. So let's hope this works out. And we went down, and I went to go sit down as we were sliding. And right as we hit the water, we must've hit a piece of iron or metal or something. It punctured a hole, stopped us short. I went flying backwards. Luckily, I stayed, in the raft for that moment. But we had to get out of the boat in the water with the waves hitting us, turn it, and I was waist deep in water, so my pants were soaked for the whole ride home. And luckily, Ford had a patch kit to fix it. But that was one of the experiences where I learned to make sure that I was always filming. So I went out and bought a GoPro, because that experience, I wanted people to also have that experience watching it, is
Yeah.
hearing the waves, hearing Ford yell, and you can't really hear because there's wind and there's waves, and and trying to navigate around the rocks and get on the dock, and it is a little chaotic. But I just can't imagine people, 100 years ago doing that in a rowboat,
Exactly.
no power,
Yeah.
just getting out there, weather, and I don't think they had the option to turn around. You would probably know better. Like, we could decide if we wanted to go on or not, and just that was the inconvenience. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
someone had to man the light, so either you weren't getting on or someone wasn't getting off, and and I think that was kind of an exciting part of the filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have told you this before you went out that day, but there were a lot of tragedies with lighthouse keepers, going to and from these
Yeah.
more remote lighthouses. I always say to people, if you explore the history of what I would call a wave-swept type lighthouse, like Halfway Rock, like Graves, and some of the others, you're probably going to find at least one tragedy in there somewhere, and sometimes multiple ones. I always tell people lighthouse keeping wasn't as romantic as you think. So you got a taste of that, and that you really put people in the middle of that in that scene.
Yeah, and I think it was Eleanor Dwyer who mentioned in the film too, is lighthouses. You talk about that romance of lighthouses, but also a lighthouse can mean welcoming as you come into a port, but it's also warning that there's just danger all around that area. And so there's that parallel between them, which is always fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of them serve as both welcome and warning. So let's look at another clip here, and this is Dave Waller, the owner of Graves Light. Both Ford Reike and Dave Waller have been on my podcast a couple of times, so I know them both pretty well. You interviewed Dave Waller at his home near Boston in his restored fire station in Malden, Mass. I've been there to interview him there. It's incredible. He's such an interesting person. But before we start discussing, let's look at the clip and then we'll talk about it some more.
So this is it. This is a first order lens, kind of a scarce item, but we're kind of happy with it. And we thought, well, that'd be really fun to see if we could find the old lens that was at Graves and maybe they'd let us put it back. So we dug around and quickly found out that the Smithsonian took it out in the 70s and they put it in a crate and they put it in a warehouse. And we figured that's just never going to go away. So we thought, well, maybe we could find one. And what we quickly learned was that you just can't find a first order lens available. So we found a couple pieces on a website that a guy was selling, just 2 little panels, and bought them and thought, yeah, we could just have a little display or something like that to say, like, it looked kind of like this. And then found a couple more. Come around this way. There's a little access door here. And now you're inside the lens, which has an interesting sound to it all by itself. We found this fellow in Australia who worked as a lighthouse engineer, and he turned us on to finding probably 8 or 10 more pieces. It takes about 40 to do a whole lens, 45 almost. Some of them were just glass prisms that were loose, and so we had to build a frame for them in the same style as the old frame, and then make them optically correct by tuning the pieces of glass with a laser to make sure that they would all point out to sea correctly. So all that math was done in nice dry weather, and here not out at the lighthouse, because we just didn't think that we could try to build this thing out at Graves, that it would be much better to build it in a climate-controlled area where we have a full shop to work in.
It's fun seeing that clip again. Dave Waller is such an interesting guy. And I've been in his home, so it's like a combination home and workshop there. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to mention, I kind of see Dave and Ford Reike in the same, cut from the same cloth. They're similar in that they're both successful businessmen, and both obviously bought lighthouses and have done a very creative job of restoring them. So it's pretty much historically correct, but there's little personal touches, I think, in both cases. So Dave's audacity with creating his own first order lens is incredible. So what were your impressions of visiting Dave and his home there?
Yeah, and I think I found out about Dave rebuilding or starting from scratch on a frontal lens through one of your podcast episodes. I filmed Dave probably a month before I launched the film. I was pretty much done at that point, but I heard that story and I thought this would be great for the Fresnel lens section. And yeah, going there was, it just, you don't, I had seen the first order lens at the Cape Inn Museum in Rockport, Mass, or in Gloucester, Mass, technically. And they're just massive. They're so big. And to think that at some point, these lenses were discarded or just shoved in a box somewhere in a museum and are just sitting silent, somewhere. It's sad in that sense, but it's cool to see Dave resurrect that. And Dave is such a creative person to take that on. And I'm not sure, there were plans for Dave to bring that out to Graveslight. I'm not sure if he's done that or was going to do that or he has done it. It's
Yep.
official.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I went out there. Well, finish what you're going to say, but I got a story to tell you.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. He mentioned he was doing it, and I think it was this past summer. And I was gonna go film it, and just some scheduling crossed up. I just wanted to see that experience. I think it would have been amazing. And so, just like Ford, I think it's great that some of these lighthouses that have gone to auction and have been purchased to see what they've done. And brought back to life. And Ford and Dave are just completely successful. The poster children of people that have restored lighthouses have done great,
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. And yeah, in August, Dave was in the process of bringing the lens and a homemade pedestal out to Graveslight. And I was there on an August day when the day before, a Coast Guard helicopter had done him the favor of flying 2 giant pieces for the pedestal out to Graves, and but they didn't want to do, I think because of liability issues or whatever, they didn't want to dangle those pieces near the gallery near the top of the lighthouse and have somebody pull them in. That was pretty dicey process. So the next day he hired a private helicopter to do that, and I was there that day, and it was unbelievable to see that in person. And when you talked about well, let me finish what you say about that. He did completely install the lens. It's all ready to go. It's been approved by the Coast Guard to be an A10 navigation, to have the LED light inside that what I call a Franken lens that Dave has created out of parts, but he's created a beautiful first order lens. It is all approved, but there's been some delay, so it's not actually relighted as the A10 navigation yet, but it will be. It will be soon. And when you're talking about your experience of going out to Halfway Rock, it reminded me so much of that day just this past August when we were getting ready to leave. The wind and seas were picking up. It was really rough. It was scary. It's one of the scariest things I've ever done, leaving Graveslight that day, and especially having to transfer from a dinghy bobbing in the waves onto the larger boat that we were getting on, and the big boat is bobbing in the waves at the same time. And I'm not too proud to say I basically dove from the dinghy onto the larger boat. So this experience I won't forget.
Yeah, as long as you get on safe, you'll do whatever you can to get on the bigger boat for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm not getting any younger, so I don't know how many more times I want to do that. But Dave is just an incredible guy, and Dave and Ford, very similar, and there are other private lighthouse owners who've done similar things. Not many have quite done what they've done, but other private owners have done a great job with their lighthouses. I wonder if you have any comment on the differences between nonprofit organizations taking on lighthouses and private owners. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's good and bad, right? Like, and by bad, for some of them, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think, we had talked about Fred and Conimicut. I mean, there's one that got, I believe it's is it town owned or state owned, but it's completely neglected. And so it would be nice if it was open to the public, but there needs to be a lot of work to do that. And sometimes to do a lot of work, it requires deep pockets. So, it requires a successful person to take on that project if they're willing to take it on, and some private owners have the money, but maybe don't want to sink their money into it, it's sort of just a luxury for them. And so I think there's that balance that maybe people don't talk about. There's opportunity to go to some of these onshore lighthouses, but for the offshore lighthouse, it's a little bit more difficult to get people out there. So I think maybe in that sense, it should go to some more private owners. So it depends on the situation, but that's just from my experience of what I've seen and what I've talked to and what I've heard. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of how I feel about it. I think there's some good and bads to both sides.
Yeah, I agree with you, but for a remote lighthouse offshore on rocks like Graves or Halfway Rock, I think the private owners, especially these private owners, is about the best possible situation, because it's so hard in today's climate for a small nonprofit to raise money for these places, especially if it's a lighthouse that nobody can visit because it's too hard to access. It's kind of out of sight and out of mind for most people. So, but anyway, they've done such a fantastic job. So let's go to another clip, and this one is Paul St. Germain, a longtime friend of mine who's been involved with Thatcher Island off Rockport, Mass. For a long time. So let's look at that clip.
What these lighthouses I've seen over the years, what comes to mind immediately is the end of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles in Paris. Woodrow Wilson was coming back from the treaty signing. His ship, the George Washington, came upon Thatcher Island in the fog. The keeper who was here saw this ship heading directly for the island and ran down to the whistle house and turned on the foghorns and just kept blowing it and blowing it. And at the last minute, the ship turned. Subsequently, we found that Wilson was not the only president aboard. Also aboard was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was Secretary of the Navy at the time. But it's things like that these lights have experienced. They weren't just sitting here lighting up the area, they were witnessing the history of this country.
I love that scene. So beautifully shot. And my first time on Thatcher Island was 1989. Back with Ned Cameron. Was the late Ned Cameron was one of the founders of, pretty much the founder of the Thatcher Island Association. I've known Paul St. Germain for a long time. I was just on Thatcher this past summer for the first time in a couple of years. I'd love it. It's a special place. So tell me about your experience with Thatcher Island.
Yeah, Thatcher Island, again, offshore, but much bigger landscape to navigate, and it's funny because me and Paul and I, we decided to do it on a nice weekend in the summer. And, I just planned for better weather just to make sure you can get access on the island and you're not just stuck in rain all weekend. And we spent the night there. And so we had planned, we got there earlier that day and we had planned to film at sunset. And, the two towers aren't very far apart. You can kind of vouch for this. Like maybe it's a 5 to 10 minute walk. It's not long. And from the moment we left, one of the old keeper's houses and started walking to which I believe is the North Tower, a massive storm rolled in, and you can see Paul's wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Like we weren't planning for rain at all. And so just from that short little walk to the tower, a massive storm rolled in, and it got really dark, as you can see, and lightning and rain. And then by the time we went back down the lighthouse and towards where you land, to get on the island, there was this beautiful sunset. And so it was really cool to experience that moment, to be a part of it. But sort of lucky for me, because then I could tell that story about the keeper that saved both the ship that was carrying Woodrow Wilson and FDR. And so that was, again, sort of paralleling that history with a present storm, and just how quickly things can turn dangerous. And so absolutely breathtaking. One of my favorite moments of probably my favorite moment filming this documentary, but also probably my favorite moment filming in general. Just being out there in a storm on top, I don't know how tall the tower is anymore. I used to know, but being up in the lantern room and just surrounded by rain and fog and lightning was just sort of an out of body experience, like something I will probably never experience again in my life. And I think that was really amazing to be out there. But we were just out there filming and talking versus someone, thinking of someone who had to run up, and keep that light lit, and make sure that mariners were safe. Like that, it was work just to do that in the rain and fog, just walking around. So I can't imagine someone having to work in those conditions. And we joked earlier about filming at sunrise and sunset, and that's sort of a story that I never really got into, was that their work happened mostly at night, and any of the keepers there were working at night. And that's when they had to make sure that light was lit. And so yeah, it was just a beautiful place, and I was grateful that Paul took me out there, I believe a couple times. But that was just one of the best experiences of my life, being out there.
Yeah. The Twin Towers are 124 feet tall each, by the way.
Yeah,
I once climbed them both back to back one day, one right after the other, and my knees weren't real happy about it. But.
Yeah, I think of someone having to run up and down those stairs multiple times in an hour, in a day, whatever. It's a lot of workout, but the view up there is absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
It's a beautiful island, and they've done a great job out there.
Yes,
sure.
They have. That shot of the lightning during that storm, that's not time lapse or anything, right? That's just as it was happening.
Yeah. Every time I tried to film it, I kept missing it. So that was the one, it'd show up in a different area. And so luckily I got at least one shot of it out there as it was going off in the distance. And then you see Paul holding like a buoy with metal, which there was a good enough time in between that it was safe.
Okay, good.
to walk around with it. But yeah, absolutely.
That lightning shot is pretty memorable. So let's go to the next clip, which is Ford Reike. We're going to come back to him. We saw him in the opening clip. So let me go ahead and play the clip with Ford and Halfway Rock. And for people who don't know, Halfway Rock Light is way out in Casco Bay in Maine, and I think about 5 miles from the entrance to Portsmouth Harbor. It's out there. It's pretty remote. So let's look at the clip with Ford Reike and Halfway Rock. Right.
Getting out here is never easy. I've been out here probably a dozen times when it was so rough that we couldn't land and just had to turn around and go home.
Okay, we good? Okay, gang. Move your weight aft and move your weight to the starboard side so we don't get too wet.
Offshore lighthouses, also called wave-swept lighthouses, are among the most dangerous and forlorn places on Earth.
Pretty good now, I'm going. Got the bow line? Yeah.
We do have a dock. It's more like a road, mossy and greasy and difficult.
We may hit the rocks on the way in. Here we go. Yeah. Up. Big wave, big wave. Okay, pass stuff out.
It's striking to be here, and some people just weren't acquainted enough with what this was like, and they thought I was nutty. And for the most part, when people get out here and see what a dramatic place this is and how historically significant this lighthouse is, they tend to have a better understanding of why I'd be passionate about this place.
That is such a great part of the film, and since I know Halfway Rock and know Ford pretty well, it has a lot of special meaning for me. Um, one I know you already talked about landing there, but tell me more about the experience of getting out to Halfway Rock. Before you do, I want to mention something. Talking about how hard it is to land there. I don't think they were out there when you were there, but Ford eventually he salvaged like halves. Was that out there?
Yeah,
Halves
yeah,
of
he
boats
showed
that
me
he
that.
had
Yeah, he's
wrecked
got
on the rocks
Yep.
and has them hanging in one room in the lighthouse they're made into beds. They have bedding in them. They're like
Yep.
bunk beds, but they're parts of the old boat. That's what I mean about him being so creative.
Yeah, I'm just grateful that I wasn't on one of those on the way in, because I'm sure that wouldn't have been fun to experience, but came close. Luckily the rubber raft just slowly deflated air when we lost. But yeah, it's incredible. And I mean, in that opening shot, you see land in the distance, but I mean, you're 10 miles away. It's not close. It's a long trip out there. And I've gone out there where we've been hitting waves, and I was, looking through a camera lens, I thought I was gonna, throw up. I don't get seasick too bad, but the experience of getting out there is not easy. Just even on a good boat, you're going to feel it, and getting on the raft, you're going to feel it. And it's something I just picked up on too, was just when we're in the rubber raft and Ford saying, move your weight to the side so we don't get too wet, not so we don't get wet. It's like, you're going to get wet. Like,
Right.
This is what you're going to experience as you go out there. And, but once you're on, you appreciate dry land a lot more. And I think those overhead shots, of the boat, of the raft on the ramp, and of, the whole island. It's just, it's just a barren landscape against the crashing waves. Like, I can't exaggerate just how intense it really is out there. And Ford shared a keeper's log. I think he has it framed in the house there, and it's intense. You hear the waves, it says waves crashing over the roof, we lost oil barrels and things like that. And it's just, I can't imagine being out there in the winter in a storm like that. I mean, these keepers went through some incredible things, and I don't know how you survive that mentally. Not only, you climb the tower and hopefully you're out of the water, but mentally you got to get back to work and keep going. And so,
Yeah.
very intense.
Well, that calls to mind. There was a story of, you've probably heard this, there were a couple of keepers out there, and there was a keeper last name Toothaker, and the other keeper was Holbrook. Yeah, I think that's right. But anyway, the two of them, Toothaker would not speak for weeks at a time to the other keeper. He just stayed to himself and he wouldn't say a word, and this drove the other keeper crazy. So he informed the authorities, what's the matter with this guy? He won't talk to me. And he did soon resign from the lighthouse service. He was interviewed many years later, and he said the light still haunted him. He would wake up in a panic in the middle of the night thinking the light wasn't on and that kind of thing. So it wasn't for everybody, that kind of life.
No, and you're isolated from everyone. And I mean, you would know better about how many weeks you're out at a time. I don't think you weren't out there for a night or two. Like, you might've been out there for weeks, months. I'm not sure, depending on where you were. So it's just, yeah, the mental toll it took on a lot of these people. It goes back to that, a lot of friends, or family members, oh, I would love to own a lighthouse. And I'm not sure you would, especially if you were working it, you definitely wouldn't want to be out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for. Any other comments about Ford and your experience with him, Ford Reike?
Ford just was incredibly helpful and willing and always game to take me out there, which, I'm forever grateful for and thankful for. It's not easy to go out there. But Ford was always willing. And I think that shows a lot about Ford's character and, and skill and talent and everything. So I'm very, very appreciative of what Ford helped me do.
Yeah, always been great to me too. So we're going to look at one more clip, and it's a change of pace. It's different from the rest of the film. It's this clip is about the flying Santa to lighthouses. And anybody who's listened to my podcast on any kind of regular basis knows that I've done, like, I think 3 episodes devoted to the flying Santa. I've lectured about the history of the flying Santa in a number of places. and I've been the vice president of Friends of Flying Santa for quite a few years. And Brian Tague, the president, for a long time, and basically he doesn't dress up as Santa himself. Other people do that, but he pretty much runs that organization and does such incredible work. And it's, if people don't know, Santa goes out in helicopters to Coast Guard stations. It started in 1929 as a way of showing thanks to lighthouse keepers, and then evolved into more for Coast Guard families, showing appreciation for them. It's a wonderful tradition. So let's go ahead and look at that clip and then talk about it.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Here we are, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years we all will be together, if the fates allow. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough. Here we are, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more.
So that's another beautiful scene in the film, and you shot it a number of different places there. The last you see it periodically through the clip, and at the end is Coast Guard Station Portsmouth Harbor, which is about 10 minutes from my home here, and I've certainly spent many hundreds of hours, or maybe thousands, over the last 20 years or so. And I've been there for the arrival of the Flying Santa a number of times. I don't think I was there the day that you were there shooting that, but I don't think it was there, or maybe it was there. I forget which place it was, where you saw one little girl was like jumping up and down, was so happy to see Santa. And then I think she started to like hug him in that clip.
Yeah.
I love it. That has happened so many times when I've been there at Portsmouth or other places. When Santa arrives, there's usually it's usually a little girl who's just so overcome with happiness and glee to see Santa that she has to run to him and hug him.
Yeah. Rewatching that scene just totally gets you into the Christmas spirit as well, and the holiday spirit. And I think the importance of tradition is it comes through there. Like you said, the excitement of children, and now being a dad. I'd filmed that before I was a dad. Now I have two sons, and seeing the joy on children, and all the effort that Brian and everyone that's a part of the Friends of Flying Santa puts in. it's just even just that one little smile that you get. It's something that kids will remember forever and parents will remember forever, and it's just so important to continue traditions like that. And when you introduced me to that story and Edward Rose Snow and just everything that, it's such a there's so much more to it, but to be a part of that and to experience it and see that tradition continue is it's just fun to be a part of and experience.
Yeah. For people who don't know, those little film clips that are in there showing Santa walking to a helicopter and stuff, and then some shots of him in the helicopter. That is Edward Rose Snow, who you just mentioned, who was a popular historian of the New England coast and lighthouses and shipwrecks and pirates and all kinds of cool stuff. Big influence on me when I was a kid. Kind of one of the reasons I got into all this. But he was the he didn't start the tradition, but he was the flying Santa from about 1935 to 1980, through 1980, and kept the tradition going for all those years. And
Yeah.
people think of the flying Santa, they often think of Edward Rose Snow.
And there's a clip, and you mentioned the little girl in present day, or a couple years ago when I was filming Excited, there's another shot of a young woman getting magazines, and she's so ecstatic, looks at the camera, like you just feel that joy watching it. And I hope that's what people get out of watching that part of the film, is just feel just the happiness, you know what I mean? And we need a lot more of that in life sometimes. And so it's good to revisit that scene and watch it back and experience traditions and build on, your own traditions.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely that feeling of joy when you watch that. So let's tell people, first of all, how can people buy this film? How can they see it? How can they get it?
Yeah, so you can go to Amazon and just search The Last Lightkeepers. That's probably your easiest bet to find the film, and you can rent it, you can purchase it, so you have it forever, or you can just purchase it, rent it for a cheaper price. And what's cool about it is for December this month is I wanted to make sure that I also got in the giving spirit, and so every purchase and rental that we get for the film will go to the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses this month, which is pretty cool. Jeremy, you're a big part of that, and so it's just a way to say thank you. The film was made for awareness purposes, hoping that I could get my generation interested in lighthouses. And so this is, sometimes awareness isn't enough, and these lighthouses need a little bit more help. So it's I hope just whatever little bit people are willing to donate or watch the film, whether it's, Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses or any lighthouse that's in your local community, or a lighthouse that excites you, go read a story and find a way to help out. And sometimes the best way to help out is to go, physically be there and help out, find an organization that needs the help too, Sometimes we all, money is tight for a lot of people this time of year in the holidays. So sometimes it's just best to put in some, some hard labor and get out there. I wish I could get out to more lighthouses and do some work, because I love kind of doing contractor type work and building and helping. And I'm sure there's tons of that at a lot of these lighthouses. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's never enough volunteers. So I concur with everything you just said. And thank you so much for donating those funds to Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. Actually, early on, you donated some funds to the organization as well. And we really, really appreciate that. Especially this past season was a tough year for Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, as you probably know, because our footbridge out to the lighthouse was washed away in a storm about a year ago. And the Coast Guard's going to rebuild it, hopefully by next season. But we didn't have any tours this past season, so every dollar is very valuable to us. So thank you for doing that. Any other lighthouse related projects on the horizon?
I don't know, but watching some of this, I might talk to you about an idea I just got. So maybe we can chat more about something. And I do want to make another feature film. So I think I'm ready. Although I got my third kid. I got a baby girl on the way, so she's due in May. Might have to take a little pause before that, but it could be a good time to plan and really map out a good feature documentary idea. So maybe you and I can chat more, because I did get a good idea for one, and maybe we can pursue it collectively. Collaborate again.
I am really looking forward to hearing about this, and I didn't know about the third child on the way. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I think we're going to stop at 3, but we're
Uh-huh.
excited to. I grew up in a small family, so I'm excited to have 3 kids.
Yeah.
We're running out of bedrooms though. So probably gonna
Yeah,
have to
well,
stop.
I've known you since before you became a dad, so congratulations on all
Thank you.
that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So Rob Apps, thanks so much for doing this today. It's fun for me to revisit this, you know, being involved in the early days of you putting this film together. It's been so great to see the whole process, and it's not dated at all. That's for sure. It holds up beautifully as a film for anybody who is at all interested in lighthouses. Makes a nice Christmas present too.
There you go.
I got to
Yeah.
say,
I
yeah,
appreciate it, and thank you for all your mentorship along the way. I probably have about 22,000 emails out to you since starting this project. So when Google checks the archives, they're gonna know about all the conversations we've had. So
Yeah.
thank you though for introducing me to all these people, for telling this story to me and to others. You do such a great job at it, and just love checking into your podcast and your posts and everything that I can get my hands on, and I hope others can do the same and check out just some stories about their local lighthouse.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks again, Rob. And I can't wait to hear about your new idea for a documentary. Thanks, and happy holidays to you and your family.
You as well. Thank you.